Hello, everybody. Catchy1383 with Catchy Gaming, coming with part 14, which is going to cover parts, I guess, technically you could do in chapter 12, but you can also do them in chapter 13. So that's what I'm going to go over. Let's start with Queen's Blood. This thing's been somewhat of a bane, in my opinion, to deal with. I would have probably just totally ignored it if there wasn't trophies involved, including the platinum. Anyways, that's the creator of the game. You play against his ghost, oddly enough. The thing that kind of irritated me is then you had to go back to the Nebel region to face off against a player there who just so happens to be Vincent. So he's traveling with us, and for whatever reason, what happens if somebody comes along who isn't Cloud, who's good enough to play? I mean, they explain that later. Actually, they explained it with the ghost part, not so much as later, that he chose Cloud because he knew he could win. But I'm just saying, what happens if somebody else came along and Vincent's running off around the world with Cloud and the rest of the crew? He's not going to be there to hand off the magical sorcerer's card. And I mean that in a very literal sense, too, I might add. So I can't remember her name anymore. And even by this point, I've already forgotten it. But you've beaten her like 3 times already. And here she is again. You have to we gotta beat her again. Oh, no. And the last time you beat her didn't even make sense because she was supposed to be like a high-ranking player. And I'm like, but I've already beaten you twice already. This doesn't make any sense to me. And I guess on a technical level, it's not her. It's possessed her. She has the Queen's Blood card, which takes possession of her. Now, up until this point, I've been getting away with just not giving a crud in any shape or form about my deck. It's just as long as it's good enough to get by, which typically it was. Maybe had to play a round or two in order to win. Because, like I said before, it feels like the game cheats and just puts out cards the AI needs to win. So sometimes you do need to get lucky. And it's not the only situation that happens. It's just a constant throughout all of Queen's Blood. Anyways, after she gets possessed by the card, they made this big huge deal of getting that sorcerer's card from Vincent. Turns out that card is absolutely useless as far as I can tell in terms of winning against the Queen's Blood. I had to look up a very specific deck in order to beat her. And luckily, unlike my other attempts, I got it in the first try. And I was actually kind of surprised by it. Like, I didn't think it would work. And it did. And the worst part is, this isn't even the hardest Queen's Blood card bout that you have. There's one more back at the Gold Saucer you can do that requires, again, at least for me, I had to look up a very specific deck. And I might add, this part of the game gets bizarre. Like, the cards start flying around and they do this whole weird anti-possession thing. I feel like this whole entire plot is just a little too involved for a card game that is mediocre at best. And most of the time it's just annoying that I have to do it. I shouldn't say have to. I mean, if I want the platinum, which I did get, I have to do it. Let's put it that way. And I'm hoping, just hoping, that in the third and final game, hopefully they don't try and squeeze in a fourth. Wouldn't surprise me if they did, pulling a Hobbit there. Maybe like, I don't know. Let's say not necessarily a fourth, maybe a DLC for Rebirth. Anyways, I'm hoping they don't do another card game. It just, not again, I'm sorry. It was bad enough. Oh yeah, and to add to the bizarreness that you see here, they're attacking each other with cards. Like I said, they're magic. It got really weird really fast. I mean, that's kind of the par for the course for this game at this point, where they add a whole bunch of story that's just completely unnecessary and kind of bizarre. So basically, outside of the Corel region, yeah, the Corel region. It's been a while since I played. I should have been keeping up with these better. I apologize. Every region has a new quest, and I just started going to each and every single last one of those. Some of them have more than one, I should say. Like the Gongaga region has two. But the Nebo region here, you go back to Calm, and you see Beck, the guy that you ended up paying for the proto relic. You know, the one they found legitimately, and then Cloud and crew tracked them down and beat him up for it. Ended up giving some gil for it. You work for them as pest control, which I actually found this part just a touch amusing. Because you can choose to answer the questions legitimately. And it's almost like a real interview in some cases. I mean, not like any interview I've ever had, but you're allowed to take it seriously, which I just rolled with. It ends with him going back to a life of crime, becoming more or less a road bandit, and Cloud getting fired and closing down his business. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see him again, especially because I am 100% sure that they will put Midgar back into the game for part 3, whatever that may be. Kind of makes me wonder if they'll keep the same layout from the remake versus whatever the third one's going to be. Moving on to Junon, with the town located underneath the city. The kids are all worried and stuff about a Warner, and they want to take their minds off of it. And the best way to do that with animal exploitation. Yay! I mean, I guess they're implying the dolphin's okay with this. It's still kind of messed up in some weird way to force this dolphin to drag Cloud around with his big ass heavy sword for the amusement of children. It's just a slightly different mini game than when you had to get up to the control platform so you can get into Junon proper. That's all it is. And this is where I found out, depending on your performance for your first go, you'll get different dialogue. I never even knew that was a thing. I just sort of got the idea after I got a B rank. They're like, oh, they said something backhanded, and I went, oh, let's try that again. See if there's if they actually change the dialogue, and if you get the best run, yeah, you get a different set of dialogue if you do better with the A rank. I was like, oh, okay. And then there was the quest where you helped Shinra troops out, the 7th, the same guys that you infiltrated and did the whole entire drill team with. You end up killing a fiend for them that's particularly nasty. I didn't have any footage for that, unfortunately, but I think that's for the best. That way I just have the cutscene. But anyways, the commander lets them know that, yeah, she knew that he was a soldier and these people are being sought by Shinra. So I'm pretty sure they're setting up the 7th to be the group of soldiers that desert Shinra and board the High Wind to sell it around the world, assuming they actually let you use the High Wind. With the way the map's set up, I don't know if that's actually going to be a thing. Back in the Nebo region, the secret laboratory has a secret section of the laboratory. It's just like, I don't know, secret Inception at this point. And you go and you exterminate a experimented variant of a fiend. And you also encounter what are VR missions, but from Hojo instead of Chadley. I actually had to think about that for a second. And for anyone who watches this, if you haven't found one of Aerith's weapons, if you do all 6 of the VR missions for Hojo, it unlocks another secret room within the secret, whatever degrees of secret laboratory there is, and you can get Eris Rod, where you can get the Ray of Judgment, which I do recommend you do get. Going to Gongaga, there's actually 2 here. Now that I think about it, there's more than one outside of Nibelheim. I think the rest of the regions have multiple quests. You meet this child book writer, and she uses some big words. I'm just a simple guy with a really garbage memory when it comes to words, to be honest. I mean, it's a miracle that I'm in the age of spell checker, because I would just be absolutely terrible. And like, the only thing I found notable about this quest, because you have to take pictures of Red 13 standing in awkward poses, was actually the writer and her rapid speech and her very large and lengthy vocabulary. Actually kind of found it a little funny. I intended to actually look up some of these words, and I just never got around to it. So, the importance of this whole entire thing, I mean, some of them weren't really all that worth going over. I just like mentioning them. They are a journal entry after all. But you do have to do them if you want to get all the quests, including the party animal quest. I can't remember what it was officially titled, but I got through this before they issued a patch. Well, I mean, I never even downloaded it because, I'm not an idiot. I mean, the game works right off the disc without any issues, and then they go and have patches that do all sorts of things that end up breaking the game, and then they had to fix it. But that's besides the point. Ultimate Party Animal, that's what it is. You have to do all those quests to unlock that. And when I played on hard, it reset all of my quests, everything, back to not being complete. So I had to do every single last quest all over again, even though I did the ones I needed to on hard to get the manuals to increase my weapon capabilities and the folio screen and all that other fun stuff. I had to do them again. All of them. Granted, it wasn't that hard because I'm more experienced and I had a better idea how to do better builds, but it was just, holy shit. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you keep quest completion tracked? I didn't tell it to reset it. I literally just played it from one chapter to the next. I didn't go back a chapter or anything like that. So this whole entire quest, I'm not going to just do a montage of what you have to do, is you have to go to all the mini games in the Gold Saucer and beat harder versions of them. I mean, this included a race against him specifically on a chocobo track where they play a metal chocobo song, which I guess I see why, because he rides a mechanical chocobo, which you get if you beat him. It's okay. It's not as good as Pico with a mythical set on, but it does all right. But yeah, no, they're not much harder. You can easily get them just by playing them. If you're experienced enough from the previous versions of them, it'll be super, super easy to break his score and get the rank you need, with one exception. So they were cheeky little dicks, and they added a 3D battle, which wasn't on the list of, things you had to do. They added that last minute just to mess with you, and I absolutely despise this whole entire 3D thing because their tells are bizarre. Some characters it's really easy, others not so much. Like when they do a hook, which is just a haymaker, and a straight punch. Some of the animations are very similar, and I absolutely despise it for that reason. So it takes a while to get used to his moves and figuring out what he's going to do. And you do all that so you can unlock 2 more 3D brawl fights, along with a whole bunch of other things for Queen's Blood. Ugh. And the last one you do is you get to fight Sephiroth, which, 1, you get a trophy for it, but 2, you get one of the best accessories in the whole entire game, the ribbon, which is pretty much like, oh yeah, I definitely gonna need this. So it became like an obsession to beat this thing. but for me, this felt harder than it should have been. At least on my part, let me rephrase that. On paper, it's pretty straightforward. You see the directions that his arms slash shoulders are going, you hit the direction on the analog stick to dodge it. I think the time's a bit iffy, and it would have been better if they used the face buttons instead of the analog stick, but what can you do? I think I got ahead of myself just a bit there. So the second battle that they unlock is Sephiroth, and he's the hardest. For sure. At least he was for me. Anyways, for whatever reason, my brain... I don't know how to explain it. Like, I see the shoulders, and I would push up instead of to the right or left when he would do a straight punch. Sorry, hook. You pushed left or right for a hook and up for a straight punch. But my brain, with those two, would just constantly get the inputs confused for whatever reason. I don't know how to explain it or why it just is that way with me. So this was just harder than I would have ever cared for. And a lot of repetition went into it. Partly due to when he does this whole rage thing, he actually repeats moves, but he has like 3 sets of moves that he'll repeat, depending on how much of a limit bar he has built up. Now they're a little sneaky there because the first rage sort of combo set he also uses for his last one when it's almost full. Except they threw a little bit of a sucker punch in there, and they altered it by throwing in a move that you weren't expecting, along with 2 other moves after that. So I had like 3 occasions where I was almost there, just one more limit gauge to beat him, and he throws in this really long combo. I mean, I eventually got him. Eventually. But like I said, this felt harder than it should have been. And I know a large part of it's because of me. Not so much the game design. I mean, in some cases, yes. The choice of an analog stick, which requires more movement for something to activate, I guess, input. And some of their tells are absolute garbage, but I don't want to say make it easier if they do it again, but I kind of don't want to deal with this sort of situation again, so I'm hoping they make it easier. Don't get me wrong, the ribbon's worth it, so I would suggest you get that ribbon, especially if you want to do the harder bouts in the Musclehead Coliseum, as well as some of the VR missions, because you'll need them. So the last thing I'll talk about is Gilgamesh. I never fought him on hard. I mean, I technically did through the VR missions. But when I fought him, the description of how to pressure him didn't make any sense, because you're supposed to block his attacks, and it has to be like a perfect block. It just can't be block. Which is the problem, because this game is super overly animated, which kind of has issues with trying to time your blocks. And he has multiple weapons, I might add, so they each have different timings. So this whole entire thing is just like a trial and error kind of battle if you don't know what you're getting into. And there's a much easier way to get through this battle, I might add. Especially after beating... I can't remember the name of the VR mission where you have to fight all the summons along with Gilgamesh and Sephiroth. I mean, he was a pushover for the most part when you get to that point. I mean, if I did this again, yeah, I could easily just beat the snot out of him. I saw no point in coming back and doing this part on hard because I did it in the VR mission. But again, it comes back to the combat. It's not the worst, but sometimes you just get situations where it's either stupidly easy or extremely hard. And sometimes you can turn an extremely hard fight into something stupidly easy. And Gilgamesh is one of those examples, as well as Sephiroth, I might add. I know there's people who show off skills they've developed, and I don't really feel like I have that compulsion to do that. I'm kind of if I don't really like it, I want to get it over and done with kind of guy. And By the time I got to playing this game on hard, it was just sort of like, I want to be done with this game. And I didn't really feel like going back and making things better in terms of my performance. I don't know. That's neither here or there. Anyways, I'm going to call it here. I know this one's a little bit lengthy, but Chapter 13 had a lot squished into it. And let's face it, the next couple of chapters are insane. So if you made it this far, thanks for watching. Have a good one.